Hello. It's just a quick, short video I want to do about, just want to talk about Trump, Donald Trump. From my point of view as a New Yorker, when I say New Yorker, not a New Yorker as a resident of New York City, but a resident of New York State. Although I have been a resident of New York City in the past, but it was a long time ago. I grew up in New York City, and I lived in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. And I remember Trump in the papers in the 80s and the 90s, although by the 90s I was living up where I live now, which is upstate New York. Now, upstate New York is very different from New York City. It's like two different states. It's like the state of New York City, which is very left, very democratic. Has always been. They've had a string of horrible mayors, one after the other, who represent that. And upstate New York is somewhat different as far as the people, not as far as the government, because the capital of New York State, which a lot of people don't know, they might think it's New York City, is Albany, and Albany has always been very democratic. In fact, many years they had a very corrupt democratic machine. And we've had a lot of democratic governors, two of them named Cuomo. And I think we've only had a few Republican governors in recent years. But New York, we've produced some pretty good politicians. FDR was from New York. Some people might not like him because might see his whole plan to deal with the depression was on the left and commie, but I don't know, he did do a pretty good job to get us through World War II and all that, and his cousin, of course, was president and governor of New York, Teddy Roosevelt, one of the greatest American presidents we ever had. Anyway, and Trump is in that in that company, and like I said, he seems to be a pretty solid guy. He's always has been a solid guy. He's never had any scandals except talking about his divorces and who he was dating when he wasn't married. That kind of thing. But there wasn't a lot of hate out of New York City for him. In fact, as far as I know, I don't know about the 70s, but from the 1980s and on in New York City, he was called the Donald, not Trump. And he was always very popular. There wasn't a lot of hate. And even when he was on TV years later, he was not despised by anybody. Some people may not have liked him, but as soon as he ran for president, the amount of hate that's come out of New York City for him, to me, is it's mind-boggling. I'm just, shocked, that, all these years he was, the Donald, and, and he was always in the paper, and it wasn't really that negative. It always seemed like, a little smarmy, but it was positive most of the time, but that's all changed, and I think a lot of that comes from the media, because I know people, up here that, if you mention the name Trump, if you start talking about Trump, they get pretty twitchy, and they get like, oh, and I'll say to them, well, why do you hate him? What has he ever done? I said, I followed the guy in the papers for 30 years, and can't say I've seen him, do anything that I found really offensive. The one, comment about the female body part thing, I've heard people I know say worse. They don't treat people they know that are female badly. They don't treat their wives badly, their girlfriends, or anything like that. So it's just sometimes it's a man thing. I've known many men who see stupid things like that about women. It doesn't define who they are. It's a stupid man thing, I mean, I've never subscribed to it, but and I'm not saying anything about myself, but I just never did. I mean, I don't like off the cuff, sexual innuendo. It doesn't appeal to me to say things like that. But I'm not going to judge somebody's character by something stupid they said once, either. And aside from that, comment about grabbing a certain body part, there isn't really much negative about Trump. It's beyond that, so I don't see why people, would judge him just on that alone. But I've heard people that I know say, well, oh, he's a sexist, and he's, this and that, and he doesn't like women, and I'm like, well, that's not true at all. Like I said, he had a lot of women in his employ for years, in key positions. And he's never been sexist. Yet people swear up and down, and these people that I know who say that, generally they watch a lot of TV, and they watch a lot of the mainstream media TV, and they're programmed pretty well by the mainstream media. And I think that's where a lot of this negativity in New York comes from, in New York City against Trump. I mean, up here it's more conservative in upstate New York for the most part, so he's not unpopular. In fact, he's probably more popular now as president than when he was, the Donald in New York City, because people weren't aware that he was a fairly conservative guy. I think he's always been a conservative guy. People have accused him like some people might say, well, he's just like that because, for politics that he switched from, say, Democrat to Republican. But I don't know what his party affiliations were. Maybe he had some Democratic party affiliations in the past. But if I were to judge him by his lifestyle and his views, he seemed pretty conservative to me his whole life. He's not, I wouldn't say that he, is the opposite of that. So, and that's how I judge people, by their actions. Maybe some of the words, but largely by their actions. And like I said, I'm judging him by his actions. I think he does a great job. I think that I wouldn't want the job of President of the United States. I think it's probably one of the hardest jobs in the world as far as the mental pressure. I think most people would go screaming mad and run out of the White House, the average person, because he wouldn't be prepared for it. And here's a guy who's a senior citizen, and he's doing a lot better job than some previous presidents we've had, I mean, some have done some bad jobs. I mean, Carter was a horrible president. He was just too young and inexperienced. So I don't see why, I mean, I think if I find it offensive that people are so judgmental against a seated president of the United States, you can't say anything, or you can't, have an opposite view against his policy, but to be outright hateful to the seated president of the United States, and for no good reason, not because of politics, not because of legislation or anything like that he's doing, just because you don't agree with him. It's madness. It's madness. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of madness since Nixon. When people hated Nixon, Nixon was not a likable guy anyway, and that's why I think people hated him so much, was because he just wasn't likable. So, for the Vietnam War, Watergate, people despised Nixon, But in the case of Trump, Donald Trump doesn't really I don't think he's really done anything, to be deserved, to be despised. So, I think people should, get a little more information. Excuse me. About their, their seated president before they, run their mouth, or because some of the stuff, I mean, that we see on TV is so disturbing, and the mainstream media doesn't seem to realize that. And the people that aren't programmed and aren't having an open mind and think for themselves. I mean, sometimes I watch this stuff in horror. It's like, really? I mean, you actually said that? But so my view of Trump as a New Yorker is that he's doing a pretty damn good job. Keep doing it. I think a lot of people in upstate New York feel that way. There's probably some people in New York City, but by and large, he's pretty unpopular in New York City right now. But not so much up here, and not with me. I think he seems to be doing a pretty good job. And that's about it. Just my view on Trump as a New Yorker myself, and being a New Yorker. He's from Queens, and I'm from Brooklyn. So that's it. If you got any comments, leave them below. Thanks.